Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Community Leaders. So, as you can tell, we're in a new room. We're in our podcast room. Thank you to the best community college this side of heaven, McClendon Community College, for providing us and knowing that we can bring things to community and getting us the podcast room, really nice mics, the equipment and everything. So, I couldn't let this moment pass, our first ever recording in the podcast room, and I had to bring on the chairman of the board for MCC, so Earl Stinnett. So welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for chairing the board. Thank you for all the hard work you put into it.
It's all labor of love. Hey,
yes.
Service.
So I'm gonna start this conversation. So I was actually talking to my sister, who was actually a friend of your younger sister.
I only have one, so
you only have one.
Narrows it down.
Yeah. And she was telling me, I'm like, hey, I'm interviewing the chairman of the board, it's Earl Stinnett. She's like, oh, yeah. I remember back in the day when he used to work for the YMCA, and she went to Hines, J.H. Hines, so she would come home from school. They would wait till you got off work, and the kids in the neighborhood would watch you walk down the street, lead a Y, walk down the street, and then take that corner to go home. So you've influenced her. She's like, I know he loved community when I saw his vigilance with walking every day to work.
Wow.
And also that he also took his job seriously. So could you even imagine that in that walking that you had that influence on just younger kids in the community?
Well, that's pretty interesting because it worked both ways. I grew up in the YMCA. Mm-hmm. Come from a large family, 5 brothers and a sister. And the YMCA was sort of, when we came up, it was our safe haven. Mm. It was where everybody sort of hung out. And if you can imagine having 5 brothers, 4 older, and then a younger brother and a sister, I don't want to say it was competitive, but when it comes to getting attention and that sort of thing, you have to kind of find your own way as far as getting your identity and that sort of thing. So the YMCA really became sort of the place to be. Mm-hmm. Met friends. There were tons of adult mentors, males, people that you looked up to. And it wasn't so much what they said, it was the way they carried themselves and the way they cared for other people. And that, it really resonated with me at a young age.
Good. Well, let's talk about those early years. Let's talk about the influence of your mother and your father. Okay. Because I know that's an interesting journey. Let's choose your father first. Okay. Like how you even found his way to this area of Texas.
He was interesting. He was from a little town called Van Alstyne, Texas. Mm-hmm. And he was in the military. When he got out of the military, that was when World War I was ending. Mm-hmm. And so most veterans that were drafted and had to go to war came back, and the government created these, what they call GI schools. Mm-hmm. And they were basically trade schools that trained soldiers to sort of reintegrate them into society. Mm-hmm. Well, my dad taught tailoring and typing at the GI school in Waco. And so that's what drew him to Waco.
That's awesome. And I know he also had some connections with Paul Quinn College.
Well, that was the other reason. You're right. He came to Waco. He actually graduated from Paul Quinn College. He came here for school. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure which came first, mm-hmm. if he came here and then started working there as a result of that. But you're absolutely right. Being at Paul Quinn College, he came to school here and sort of hung around.
Now, I know, it's speaking with Paul Quinn is the HBCU. And so I remember when I was in the 90s when they decided to move Paul Quinn from Waco mm-hmm. to Dallas. And I didn't realize the impact that would have on our community. And, I was so young. And I remember telling, older leaders now, as our age, I'm like, why did you guys let Paul Quinn leave? Yeah. And our teachers and just
oh my goodness.
Workers and I didn't realize how many of my people that I saw on the everyday just through community had matriculated through Paul Quinn College.
Absolutely. I would venture to say the vast majority of teachers, mm-hmm. black teachers in Waco ISD, I mean, gosh, as far back as I can remember, were generated through Paul Quinn College. Mm. I mean, people would come here specifically from Deep South, Mississippi, Alabama. Mm-hmm. I have tons of friends that were teachers in Waco ISD that came to Waco to go to Paul Quinn College. And it was so interesting They lived in the community, went to church with us, and so it developed relationships, and they made education not only attainable, but they made it tangible because you could touch professors. Many times, like when I would go to the YMCA, I'd walk through Paul Quinn College. I'd walk through the campus. And so it was that open. And so it's just amazing. You're talking about leaving a huge void. I dare say Waco's really, particularly East Waco's, never recovered. You could almost trace the performance declines in Waco ISD from when Paul Quinn left. I mean, it's a really interesting parallel, and it has to be directly related. I hadn't done any, research on it, but I mean, it's very clear.
Yeah, because those teachers, they were educated in Waco.
Right.
They taught Waco and they retired.
Right.
So they had a connection. They were involved in the community. So, like, I remember, even though I was bused to Crestview and different schools, it was still teachers that knew my mom.
Absolutely.
And they knew her, and they've been, and I remember going to Waco High when I registered for the first year. They looked at her and said, "How many more children do you have?"
Oh, wow.
Because my older 3 siblings had already gone through.
Yeah.
So they're very familiar with our family.
Absolutely.
So they knew their last name. They knew exactly what mom they were dealing with.
Wow.
So I came in to these school environments, Estero, Wiley, with Williams. And like I came in with these people already knowing my family and my lineage. So I didn't have the opportunity to not do my work.
Right. There was an expectation.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like, I know your grandmother lived on Chestnut.
Right.
And I know, I'm confused. And I see it now even when I teach in dual credit and our students from our community, and I'm friends with their aunts, uncles, mom, dad on Facebook.
Sure.
And I don't even say anything to them. I'm like, oh, so your kid, oh, you know my uncle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a different level, and they work harder. And those are those social things you can't teach.
I agree. I'll tell you a quick story because all of my family, with the exception of one brother, went through J.H. Hines way back. I won't talk about the years. So I'm 5 years old.
Okay.
I'm on my way to school. Actually, I went to the doctor, so my mom was driving me to school because we walked to school. We're only 5 or 6 blocks from school. So this particular day, she drives me to school, and we have a fender bender. So I'm in the back seat of the car, and I realize my mom just ran into the principal of our elementary school.
Oh.
His name was Fred Batts.
I remember Mr. Batts.
And man, you talking about terrified. I'm 5. I'm like, oh my God, my mom hit Mr. Batts. So they get out, and they have a conversation. How's the family? How's so and so and so and so? And I mean, very cordial. No issues at all. And, my eyes are just like this big. My ears are tuned in. I'm listening to every word. And I learned so much from that in terms of, every issue isn't a major issue.
Right.
People are just people. Because I had Mr. Batts on, the highest pedestal that you could have him on. And so I learned a lot from that in terms of, again, how to interact with people and relate with people. It's pretty interesting.
So you started, let's go and segue into your mom. So like your mom's life and how she came to be and what was her occupation.
Okay. She was a nurse, she's, an LVN, and ironically got training here at MCC.
Okay.
And she worked in nursing homes primarily. And the reason she was from a town called Rockwall, but she had an aunt here, and she came to live with her aunt, and her aunt basically raised her. So her aunt, which would have been our great aunt, and our great aunt's husband. So our aunt and uncle basically sort of acted as our grandparents. They took us to church. They really nurtured us. They were the primary babysitters. Because interestingly enough, my dad worked probably until I was 14. He worked for the Social Security Administration, but he worked in Port Arthur. That was as close as he could get. So he would go to Port Arthur. He'd work in Port Arthur Monday through Friday and come home Friday night and stay until Sunday evening and go back. And then my mom worked typically an overnight shift. But, we were very, very, very much middle class. But when we were coming up, there just weren't a lot of opportunities for, black families. Most of them were, blue collar workers. And the middle class, you were either a school teacher, you worked at what was called General Tire, which was a major factory in town. And so my mom and my dad really sort of took care of the community. If there were some medical issues or things like that, it seems like she would always take care of folks. She had an older aunt, like her aunt and uncle, and then there was another cousin that she used to care for all the time, besides the 7 kids. And then my dad it was interesting. He worked on, he had a hobby, worked on electronics, so he fixed televisions and radios and things, did income taxes, and because he worked for the Social Security Administration, people, anytime they had any kind of business questions, not even Social Security, just anything, he was sort of the go-to person in the community. So there were community people in our houses all the time. And I really think that's what drove or what created the mindset about service for me and all of my brothers and sisters.
Yeah, like you don't realize, and I see it with my son, the impact of just those relationships have on you, and how you see community, how you see people,
right,
and the positive, and you see them in their just state of being human.
Right. Exactly right.
Hey, I'm coming. I need help. Can you help me? And you have bread. I'm sure you had something to eat, something to drink with them. Yeah.
Always.
So yeah, that's those connections, and we talked about this how pretty much every family in this McLennan area has been touched by MCC.
Exactly.
Like you can go back to almost every family. Like how impactful is a community college when it can touch? And that's why I say public colleges and private colleges, but community colleges, that's what's going to change community.
Oh, there's no doubt. And one of the things that always concerns me is McLennan being sort of a best kept secret or a secret, and even further being taken for granted. It has to be nurtured, it has to be taken care of, and has to be respected. And I'm not saying that it's not, but I really hope that the community understands what a gem they have.
Yes. And like I tell students, I did a student orientation this week, and we was talking. I'm like, this is not grade 13.
Right. I love that.
And I think that's the kind of image that people have, and they don't realize the amount of work we're putting into it, and that we're raising future leaders for jobs that don't even exist yet.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's a tough job. We're up to the task. We have wonderful people here. Let's talk about how you matriculated and went through the public school system in Waco. So I think that's a good connection.
Okay. So when I came through, there was a program called Head Start. Head Start then was in the schools, the public schools. So I started Head Start in a school called R.L. Smith. And then I went to J.H. Hines from 1st through 6th grade. And then interestingly enough, when I was going to the 7th grade, I was supposed to go to G.L. Wiley. Well, that's when federal desegregation sort of kicked in. And so we were bused from East Waco all the way out to Lake Air High School, Lake Air Middle School. Lake Air went 7th, 8th, and 9th. So we went there for 3 years, and then I ended up going to Richfield High School. It was an interesting time because desegregation, they did teachers first. So they moved white teachers into black campuses and vice versa. So to sort of diversify. So my first memory of having a white teacher was maybe in the 2nd grade. There was a Miss Sullivan. And she was really good. But when I was in the 5th grade, there was a teacher, his name was Fred McNeil. And Mr. McNeil had a tremendous impact on me and a lot of my friends. He had a farm, and he took a lot of us kids, maybe 10 or 12 of us, to his farm. And we spent the night, we went fishing. He had sort of a stock tank on his property. And, I mean, it was almost like a Boy Scout feel, that sort of thing. But we learned so many things from him. And one of the most important things we learned was that people are just people, and that, role models can come in any shape, size, color, whatever. But it was, he he had a tremendous impact on, I think, me and my mindset as far as how to relate with people and things.
Yeah, I think that's awesome because I see here and even though I wasn't born in that time, I try to read and find information and just to imagine Mr. McNeil and what he went through in the backlash.
Oh, yeah.
He probably got to even go and teach in your school. And then not only he brought you guys into his home and saying this is, and like just welcoming. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it was tremendous.
So now you're matriculated. So now you've gone through that elementary experience. You're going to middle school. How was that middle school experience?
Middle school, and it was interesting. Our middle school experience and high school experience were great. But desegregation was really interesting. I'll be real honest, students didn't know how to react.
Okay.
It was new, it was forced, and so because of community conversations, racism, and things like that, there was a mindset that students were going to have to fight when they got off the bus. So literally, when our buses pulled up, students would get off, and I mean, man, they just started fighting.
For no reason.
There was no rhyme or reason to it, and I was like, wow. So backing up a little bit, going into the summer, going into my 7th grade year, I was fortunate to go to this, what they call an enrichment program at Viking Hills Elementary School. It was a 6-week program during the summer. First time I'd ever been in a classroom with a non-black student. So we made friends with some white students and some other folks. I mean, and again, learned lessons like, man, they're pretty cool, you know. And so when school starts, some of the friends also went to Lake Air.
Okay.
Well, these same friends that I made were getting jumped on by my neighbors. I'm like, what in the world is going on? It was, it was different. And so I found myself intervening on their behalf, like, hey, he's cool, leave him alone. Gotta stop. What are y'all doing? And that was a real confusing time for the first 30 days of my 7th grade year. There were police on campus, literally. Police on campus running people to class and walking the halls to make sure that there was no more violence. So we got through that. My high school experience was really exceptional in terms of student behavior. I mean, I literally don't remember any fights.
What high school did you attend again?
Richfield.
Richfield.
It was really interesting. And there was still the, I guess, the racial elements. I tell this story all the time during athletic events, particularly football and basketball. Midway was our arch rival. And Midway was very much predominantly white and perceived to be the rich upper class school. And so we were pretty diverse at Richfield. So during the sporting events, they do the cheer, we've got spirit. Yes, we do. We've got spirit. How about you? Well, Richfield would sit back and they would come back and say, we've got blacks. Yes, we do. We've got blacks. How about you? And you'd hear just, this hush over it. It was pretty creative, actually.
Yeah, it's very interesting. As I attended Waco High and HBCUs and different, it's very interesting the type of cheers that come from the crowd.
Yeah, some real creativity.
Yes, very, very interesting. Alrighty, so we're moving through high school. Did your parents even discuss with you guys about just race in America, racial issues?
It was so interesting. They really didn't. They talked about people and treating people right and those sorts of things. They didn't shy away from questions if you asked them. Okay. But we really, we really didn't. One thing that was interesting. So we're all, my 5 brothers and sister, we're all in the same same house, but my oldest brother went to Waco High School. That used to be the old, the CSC
building right now, MTC campus, right?
So, and then my next 2 brothers went to Jefferson Moore High School, which is right on the river.
That's where my mom went, Jefferson Moore.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the rest of us went to Richfield. Okay. And it was interesting, and I'm still not quite totally sure why that was. They had sectors and zones, but they also had some choice in there in terms of where you could go. But I always found that very interesting. Our parents were very, they were both, particularly by those standards, the standards in that day, both educated, considered very much educated. And so there was an expectation in our house that you were going to go to school or you're going to go somewhere, and then like back then there were only like 2 or 3 choices. You got a job, you went to the military, or you went to school.
Gotcha.
And so it's interesting. I had a couple of brothers that went the military route. Everybody else went the education route. And so, you used the term, and it's really interesting. We were talking earlier about this 13th grade mentality. And I have to be real honest. When I graduated high school on my birthday.
Okay.
And so, we celebrated, had a good time. The day after, I'm into summer, getting that thing done.
Just hanging out.
Man, and back then we didn't start school until like the Tuesday after Labor Day.
Right.
And so we're going on having a good time, and then all of a sudden, the end of August is hitting, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, ooh, the school's starting next week, but I'm out of high school.
Did you register for school? So you hadn't registered at all.
Freshman year at McLennan Community College, I registered late.
Oh.
Because,
okay.
13th grade,
Right.
Up until that point, my parents had registered me.
Got you.
And so, and again, you keep in mind, my dad worked out of town. And so, and then my mom worked at night. And so it was kind of like, wow. My brothers would say, hey, what are you going to do? And so, I was not the greatest. I was really intelligent, really smart, book-wise. But, man, I was lacking some things as far as maturity and common sense. And back then, MCC had intramural programs. They'd have dominoes, basketball, volleyball, cards. And, man, I was a master at that. Because I had, at that time, I was already working with the YMCA. So rec was me. I was kind of good at that. So they'd give T-shirts to the winners. I had more T-shirts. But it just so happened that most of the intramural tournaments happened during my Spanish class.
Oh, that you supposed to be sitting in?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I took Spanish in high school, junior, senior in high school, mastered it, did really, really well. And so my freshman year in college, got the syllabus, and I'm like, man, this is brilliant.
Right.
And had an extremely high average, and doing well, making a really good A, strong. But when I found out they didn't really check roll as far as calling your names out,
right.
There was this, this level of maturity you had to have. Nobody's looking over your shoulder.
Right.
You got to be there. Well, I wasn't there. I'd come in, turn in my work, that sort of thing. So I come in one day for an exam, and in the seat that I normally sit in, there's an envelope there.
Okay.
And it was a drop slip.
Oh.
So I'd missed 22 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just 22.
That's a lot of time.
That's an awful lot.
Yes.
But in my mindset was, but I'm making an A. I've aced every test. I've turned in every assignment. Well, you're going to have to do it again because you've been dropped. And so that was really that was an eye-opening experience for me.
So what was your level of expectation when you was coming to MCC? Did you even have a level?
13th grade.
Got you.
13th grade. It was a continuation of high school. I had several friends, quite a few friends that were there. The thing that was interesting is back then we had Jefferson Moore, Richfield University, and Waco High. So not only was it the 13th grade, it was great because you had people from every high school that were in the 13th grade.
Yeah.
And so there was a piece missing in terms of sort of counseling, mentorship, a college orientation course. Orientation took about 30 minutes during registration. So there wasn't this realization that, hey, being a college student is different from being a high school student. And so that was really eye-opening, really eye-opening.
Now, you already know, if you can research Earl Stinnett, you already know he's worked with the YMCA, over Parks and Recreation. So what I really want to know is your lessons learned from those two organizations that you've taken to the rest of your life. Yeah. So what are some of those lessons?
And the YMCA was interesting. And the Y, it had it's Young Men's Christian Association.
Yes.
And so The organization was excellent because, again, it was a safe place. When I was a young person, it really provided stability, provided a place where you met wholesome people, but you met all types of people. And so that in and of itself really taught me some life lessons in terms of how you treat people, how you meet people, and how you evaluate people. It afforded me a tremendous amount of opportunities, ability to play sports, during the summers, somewhere to be that was supervised, organized activities. And I guess one of the biggest things for me is access to, I call them mentors, but it's probably better characterized as role models. Because it wasn't what we consider mentorship. It wasn't a one-on-one type deal. But there were people that you could just watch and see. And the neat thing about it is they would hold board meetings there where members of the board from the community would come over. I don't know if you remember Cleo de Babels? You know Mr. Babels? He used to be a principal. He was a director of personnel for Waco ISD. Strong role model. I mean, everybody revered him. Several people like him that Noah Jackson, who was a council member, they would frequent the YMCA. They'd support it and raise funds for it. But they'd come through and you'd see them, and you'd be awestruck almost. And so to watch them do what they did and the way they carried themselves really opened my eyes in terms of the impact people could have just by doing what they do. Not necessarily directly mentoring people. And then guys like Noah Jackson coached Pee Wee football. There was an organization called the Kennedy King Elks. And back then they were the program. They generated several athletes that went on to play professional basketball, and many of them went on to play college basketball. And they instilled the right values in those people. The teamwork, the work ethic, discipline, all of those things. And so that from the and then when I turned 15, I actually got the opportunity to start working at the Y. And so there was a director named Sterling Hope, really solid older gentleman, and he sort of took me under his wing, and he taught me a lot of lessons and provided a lot of opportunities in terms of teaching, doing odd jobs and things like that. And then I became a counselor, and then what was the program director, which was kind of like an assistant, and then went on to be the director.
Cool.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. It impacted tons of lives. I mean, to this day, I see people all the time that say, man, I remember when we were at the Y, that was the most fun time in my life. Or, we really loved the Y, that sort of thing. It's like, wow. It's a good place, really good place.
Like even, I think I talked to a few people, like even like you and your wife. Like your wife was very active too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I saw you a few weeks ago, you guys were running the basketball tournament for middle school and high school boys and girls.
Yeah.
So how did you guys meet? How did you meet her?
Interesting story. We met at the YMCA. So her older sister dated my boss at the time.
Okay.
And my boss was a guy named Pat McNeil at the time. Pat McNeil's a former Baylor football player, graduated from Baylor, played professionally, came back to Waco and worked. Well, they dated, and she's much younger than me.
Okay.
And so it was interesting. That was the first time we kind of met and sort of caught eyes or whatever, met. So we sort of just kind of developed a friendly relationship up until the time she went to Baylor. She went to Baylor.
Okay.
She would never say it, but she's a legendary basketball player at Baylor.
That's what I've heard.
At the time she graduated, she was the all-time leading scorer in Southwest Conference history for women.
Okay.
She was the only player at that time with 2,000 points and 1,000 rebounds for her career.
Wow.
She's on in the Baylor Hall of Fame, 75th Southwest Conference, all 75-year team. I mean, just all kind of accolades. But you ask her anything about basketball or sports, and she just won't talk about it. It's just not important to her.
Right.
That was sort of a means to her getting an education.
Got you.
And but she was raised. She's the youngest of 16 kids. And yeah, I thought I had a big family until I got married. And you're talking
So
about,
now these big families became
my
bigger.
goodness, yes. And you're talking about close knit though. Extremely close knit family. There is probably not a weekend that we don't have a house full of relatives.
Wow.
Yeah, and her being the baby, everybody. Now some of the siblings have deceased, but everybody has kids.
Yeah.
And they're just extremely close knit. And she's the one thing that we share is our heart for service. She she's a baby whisperer. We both retired from service type issues. She worked for Child Protective Services for a couple of years. She taught school, and then she had a long stretch as a juvenile probation supervisor. So always serving and working with kids. That's just where her heart is. And then when we retired, purchased a daycare center. And sold that in June of 2022. Retired in 18, bought it, did really, really well, and then sold it in 2022.
Okay.
And so now I guess we're sort of really into grandparenthood.
Got you. Got you. So now we talked about so many things and issues in Waco. So I guess my next big question is, so what are the big issues in McLennan County? And we can talk about one, but tell me a big issue that you see around community.
Man, and it may surprise you a little bit, but lack of parental support.
Okay.
I just, we talk about poverty, we talk about the issues with education. Well, I'm just a firm believer if parents are supported and parents are supported in a way that they can support their kids, I think we could really address a ton of issues. One of the big things is, parents are younger. Parents that didn't have positive experiences at school don't really know how to parent. And, it used to just be kind of putting a roof over you, providing food and putting a roof over people's heads, and then that was it. Now there's so many other things to navigate. All the outside forces, kids have access to so much information, and positive and negative. And if there's no one there to sort of direct them, it's you get chaos. You really do. It's a tough one, I know. It's a tough one. But
it is.
You think about school districts, and one of the things that I really worry about is, schools, ISDs, they take kids where they are, where they come into the system, whether they're behind in reading, whether they have social issues or whatever. They do it and they manage it as best they can, and they get them through. Well, that's the problem. They get them through. They don't get them through well. They get them through. And consequently, what ends up happening is community colleges, trade schools, they get students that aren't prepared for college. And so what ends up happening is you have to take them where they are. Well, if you get someone who's been passed through and they're reading on the 6th grade level asked to do college level work, how successful can you be given the parameters and the restrictions you have? It's tough. It's tough. And so, the question becomes, okay, how do you address that? What do you do about that? Because it's easy to identify the problems.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we got to quit running from it.
Okay.
I really think we have to figure out a way to involve parents more and support parents. Every elementary school and ISDs have social workers.
Yeah.
They have social work programs, and they never say it, but to be honest with you, my mindset is, or my opinion is, we're circumventing parents. We're doing things, even the way we teach on the elementary school level, we don't teach so that parents can help their kids with homework. Now, part of that is because parents hadn't been doing a good enough job, so it was easier to sort of keep parents out of the equation and handle it all in-house. Well, I just don't think that's fair from this standpoint, or sustainable. When kids go home, their parents still have to be their cheerleaders. Their parents still have to provide places for them to study that are quiet, that are well lit. Parents have to make sure kids are in bed at a certain time. I think one of the issues is we don't engage parents in things that they can do. Even if as a parent you can't read and you can't write, we can empower you to access resources. We can empower you or educate you in terms of what we need that child to be able to do when they get to school. If parents, and I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this. If you can just get kids prepared to come to school and listen and be quiet and be disciplined enough to not be an issue, a behavioral issue for a teacher. So now instead of me spending 30 minutes as a teacher trying to get control of my classroom and only having 25 to teach, now I've got 55 to teach. That little change would make all the difference in the world. We just have to.
This is a big issue because I talk about with my friends from professionals. So how do you teach people how to? Because they probably weren't ready to be parents.
Right. Oh, there's no doubt.
So how do you get people? And that revolves self-reflection.
Sure does.
Me wanting to improve myself. So how do you get adults to be better adults?
First of all, you have to engage them. I think you have to engage them in this way. Rather than saying you're not doing your job,
okay,
you have to approach them from this standpoint. We need you to partner with us so that your child can have the best outcome possible.
Like a partnership.
We can't do it without you.
Right.
Oh, yeah. You have to approach them from the partnership standpoint. Because if somebody's telling you you're not doing your job, the first thing you do is get defensive.
Right.
You don't get reflective, you get defensive. You may get reflective later, but your initial reaction is you get defensive. And I've had parents, when I was working with the city of Waco and doing after-school programs, one of the things we did was we tried to do programs where we had parents and kids read together, and we gave them prizes and things like that to encourage it and promote it. There's nothing more powerful than a kid going to their parent and asking their parent to do something, particularly when it's educationally based and the outcome is going to be positive. And if you give the right incentives, kids, man, they will wear parents out. And so I think we have to be creative in terms of the strategies that we use.
Okay.
But I think using those accusatory terms, like I know schools have truant officers that go out and they take parents to court and that sort of thing. Well, you don't want to, I don't think that's the most effective way to reach parents. I really, really do think engaging them in being partners.
Okay.
And then providing an opportunity for parents even to go back to school. Because in many, many cases, the parents that do the worst job or that don't do a very good job were not very successful students themselves. They had negative experiences when they were in school. Consequently, the last place they want to be is on the school campus. So, and I had a superintendent that, Roland Hernandez, when he was here, we had a conversation, and one of the things he talked about was you almost have to apologize to parents when you're trying to engage them, saying, if you didn't have a very good experience, I apologize for that. But we cannot allow that to be a barrier to your child being successful. And then lead into, we really need your help in helping your child be as successful as they can. Here are some ways you can help. And making sure that everything we ask them to do is very much doable. I mean, you can't ask a parent that can't read to read to their child.
Right.
But you can ask a parent to have their child read to them.
Okay.
And one of the things that I found is really, really powerful is when kids see parents reading or studying, writing checks, kids are automatically inquisitive and they watch just about everything that we do.
Agree.
And so that's an opportunity that we can take advantage of as parents. But again, those things have to be pointed out to parents.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of, in my mind, that's the way we approach them. Parent education can be expensive and it can be frustrating. And so I think when districts start looking at solutions to issues, they look at path of least resistance and how can I get the most bang for my buck. And so I don't know if, I've seen a ton of iterations of parent education. They've had parent academies.
Yeah.
When I was coming up, PTAs and that sort of thing. When I was with the city, we used to do we did a parent services fair with an elementary school where we basically had, we provided dinner and we had about 30 community agencies come out and set up information booths. We had hearing testing, eye screening. We had information on getting your kids tested if they needed to be tested. It was included a Meet the Teacher night. And it was very, very low-key, and it was really geared towards serving parents. Free after-school care, those sort of things. It was really a parent services fair. Great turnout. Just about every parent that had a kid, it was in conjunction with Brook Avenue Elementary School.
Okay.
And just about every kid that was represented with a parent. That was, I think, the last year that I was with the city. And I don't know if they repeated it or continued it or not, but it was, the concept of reaching parents and getting them out.
Yeah, I know. I work with a lot of our high school partners, and I remember Freeman's, the Keely and Freeman. So I work with them, and they work with the parents at Waco High.
Okay.
So Waco High has been in the news a lot for a lot of negative stuff, but it's a lot of good work going into that school. So they working with parents, parent outreach, PTA. So they had this parent night, and this was after Dad had found a few weapons on campus. Okay. So this PTA and parent night had a lot of parents attending, because the one way it's interesting to get them there was because it was something negative. Right. I thought that was interesting too. Yeah. But okay, had a vibe, we're gonna come. And she had me come in. We talked about the dual credit program. We got our kids involved, but I also talked about how we have programs at MCC to help parents if they want to continue their education.
Excellent.
And I was surprised the amount of people who came up to me and talked to me about that. I'm like, oh, and we had already talked about research, even in our faculty summer institutes and our kind of professional development. It's like, if we can get the parents, even the grandparents, back into MCC, how that would affect those student outcomes and those high school students. So I see that. Like I saw that physically happen that night, that we had those parents interested in, and I got them to resources here so they can finish those degrees that they didn't finish. We talking about some of those parents, and one lady was honest, she's like, it's probably been 20 years. I said, we can get you back here though. That's right. Let's talk to a success coach. Let's do this. Let's make these steps. So I totally see it. It's hard though, because raising a little human is hard. I know.
Oh my goodness.
Because my son is 14, and there's so many influences.
Absolutely.
And so it's just, and the stuff that those public school teachers have to deal with the phones and inappropriate materials that the students have on the phones, and the parents not monitoring the phones. And so I'm talking with him about, hey, if they're doing inappropriate things with their phones, you're watching these inappropriate pictures or images, let me know so we can have a conversation.
Right.
And we do. So it's uncomfortable.
Sure.
But I'm like, I'm glad you came to me and told me that, because those parents wasn't on it.
No.
So that he gets influenced so much more by his peers.
That's unfortunately, it's typical.
Yeah.
But so take that same scenario. How many parents don't tell a teacher, hey, if you find those things, contact me, or can you even contact them?
Right.
I've had parents, even with after school programs and rec centers, basically say, hey, when my kid is there, he's yours. Right. Don't call me. I'm like, wow.
That's how my mom was.
Really?
Oh, what? And so I was.
It's different with y'all. Because
she was like, don't call me.
Y'all had fear though.
Fear. So I would tell look, you cannot call my mom. Say if we call your mom, you can be this less consequence. But if I don't call her, you have to do 2 months of lunch attention. Right. I did a lot of lunch attention at Wiley. I did a lot. They know I'm like, do not call Margaret Butler. Yeah. Because if you call her, she's probably at her job or resting.
Oh yes.
It's funny.
My mom's name was Margaret too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and she was. My parents were very physical.
That's a good way of putting it.
But they didn't have, it's interesting. Back then, it didn't take much. It
did.
Maybe one time, and all of a sudden, the attitude adjusted. It was.
So I agree. Getting more parents involved, even people that didn't want to. Like, I mean, sometimes children just happen, and you get no situation we understand. But having that support, grandparent support, aunties and uncles support, I think that will improve any community.
Peer pressure is interesting, and you can sort of touched on it a little bit. I always tell this story. Both my sons played basketball at La Vega.
Okay.
Really good athletes, very popular in school. But we used to always tell them, because my wife and I had standards.
Okay.
They used to have this thing called no pass, no play.
Right.
We told our kids years ago, hey, you make a C, you're off the team.
Right.
You make a B, we got to talk about it.
Okay.
And I said the B, and it's not so much the grade, it's the effort.
Right.
You got to be doing the best you can do. So son made 92 one time, and we were really, really not very happy with him because that wasn't his best.
Got you.
And so we made that point. But I used to always call them, I said, you guys are popular nerds. And they used to get so mad. And I said, y'all need to take that as a positive. I said, the connotation with nerd is, you're studious, you're book smart, not the Steve Urkel kind of nerd, just that you're smart. I say, but the way I look at y'all is you guys can really relate to any student there. You're articulate and intelligent enough to speak intelligently. You are, grounded enough to speak to people who are having a hard time, who may not be as educated. I said, so don't take that educated nerd as or a popular nerd as a negative.
Okay.
And so they felt better about it.
Okay.
But it's interesting. You talk about the influence and what the influences and what have you. That school district was interesting because middle class people were sort of the highest level.
Got you.
In the social structure there.
Got you.
And so that was really kind of a different dynamic. I dare say La Vega may still be that way.
I think it's still like that. I'm with you.
And it creates an interesting dynamic because you don't have the economic superiority hanging over your head as much. And then the one thing that I think La Vega does, and some other districts do it pretty well, is that they take advantage of athletics to reach parents in a different way. Now, I think one of the things that I would like to see more schools do is if you're recruiting PTA, members, or if you're trying to access parents for parent education programs or whatever, do it through athletics. Because for whatever reason, they turn out for athletics. So if they're coming to an athletic event and you can put something in their hand or you can have a conversation with them before they get in the gym, you stand a better risk of a better chance of getting more of them. It seems like they tend to not respond to other ways of communication.
Right. Yeah.
And so we got to be kind of intentional and creative about how we reach them.
Yeah. Like even me, because I was telling my husband, I was like, I want to look like I'm involved, but I don't want to be involved. But I go to the meetings and I'm there, and like it was tied up list. I'm like, oh sure. I'm like, what is the least amount of work I can do? And I had to stop myself. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Like I need to be there so my son can see what it takes to be a part of school and community. So this is me. So even me, I have to check myself sometimes. So that's why I'm coming from a place of audience that. So even I got to check myself too. Like okay. You got to volunteer for PTA.
Well, you do. You have to volunteer at school on some level. PTA may not be the vehicle that you use, but you do have to be involved. The visibility is important. It's important that other kids and parents see you, but it's really more important for your child directly.
It is.
And it's funny. Both my sons are parents now. And so, our conversations have changed a lot.
Yeah.
But they talk about how they took for granted all the things that we did and made them do, how we would go to PTA, go to meet the parent night.
Yep. I have mine this Thursday. Night. Yep.
It was so funny. Back then we had beepers. So my wife and I both had beepers. I'd have a piece of paper. I'd have our home number on there. I'd have our beeper number on there. I said, hey, my wife and I are both very, very flexible.
Right.
If you have any issues with our sons, please call us.
Right.
We can leave our jobs and
Right.
be here.
Right.
And it was important for us to say that in front of our kids.
Oh, yeah.
You're talking about, I mean, you know, it wasn't really necessarily meant to be a threat. It was meant to be support.
Right.
But saying it in front of them had the impact that, man, you know, not to mention that we were in the community, so most of the teachers knew us and we had a relationship with them. But I wanted the homeroom teachers to know,
Right.
hey, their number one priority here is to get an education.
Right.
So they come to school and they're going to listen, they're going to be quiet.
Right.
And it really, really works wonders.
It does.
And so, you know, I know a lot of teachers that dread meet the parent night. You know, they dread it because, number one, a lot of parents come with the wrong expectations.
Okay.
And also that conversation sometimes can be difficult if a teacher is trying to basically say, these are my expectations.
Right.
And so, you know how first impressions are. So a lot of times if you, parents come and they don't hit it off with the teachers and all of a sudden they verbalize that. And so now you got a 6-year-old who's going to class for the first time. And the first thing they're thinking is, well, my mama don't like you no way.
Because she said that at the house.
My mama don't like you anyway. And so you're starting off on a negative foot. And so, you know, it just kind of goes downhill from there.
Okay. All righty. What's your favorite book that our students community must read for you?
I have a couple. You know, the one that comes to mind is one called Communication, Sex, and Money.
Communication,
Sex, and Money.
And money. I hope I can say that on this.
Well,
I'm sure I can.
It's actually a Christian-based book.
Okay.
And it's really based on the 3 major issues that impact marriages.
Okay.
And that have to be discussed in relationships. And it's really based on kind of from a male perspective. Before you go into a relationship, you need to make sure all of your past relationships have been settled. And it goes on to talk about if you felt like you had a relationship that didn't end well, that you go back to that person and apologize or at least make peace with that person in terms of why things didn't go well and make sure that they're whole. So, for instance, if you had a relationship with someone and you left and didn't discuss why you left, you go back and make sure that person understands, hey, it didn't have anything to do with you. I wasn't mature enough or whatever. So that one. And then also I've been reading President Obama's 3 books and then Becoming with Michelle.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, those are really interesting to me.
Yes, those are very good books. Communication, Sex, and Marriage. Interesting.
And money. Yeah,
and
communication,
sex, and money. Got you. All righty. Who inspires you?
I get inspired easily, I guess I should say, by a lot of people. I really tend to be very positive. And as I've gotten older, I pay attention to a lot more things, particularly positive things. So I have a lot of older people, teachers, acquaintances that I really admire, particularly as I get older and I sort of start appreciating the things that they did. But as I've gotten older and when I was like running the YMCA, like Mr. Babels is one that comes to mind. He was, you know, much, much older than I was. But because I was running the YMCA and I was, I don't know, a leader, whatever you want to call it, our conversations changed. And so rather than him looking at me as a student or a younger person, he sort of looked at me more almost as a peer. And so our conversations changed in terms of him sharing things that he went through as an administrator coming up, and then pitfalls, things that you really need to be careful about. And then there are conversations about about race relations and things like that. And so Mr. Babels was a huge one. A man named Sterling Holt, who was a director at the YMCA at the time. There was a gentleman, or is a gentleman, his name is Mason Yarbrough. Mason is a retired administrator with the city of Waco.
Okay.
He was interesting because he was, and I guess still is, a Republican, which in our upbringing, it was unheard of for a black person to be a Republican. There was another gentleman, his name was Roscoe Scott, and he was a very, very intelligent guy. And as he got older, he was basically a retired, I guess you'd say, a political analyst type. He was hired in the 70s to basically work with Republican candidates, primarily white Republican candidates, on how to access the black vote. And was paid really, really well. As he got older, we had some conversations, and I mean, just fascinating. So a black man in the 70s who is a Republican, who basically is kind of looked at in a different light by his peers, his friends. And he went on to explain, he said, man, so here is the 70s. We're struggling to find employment. I've got a family to take care of. I've got, kids that are getting ready to go to college. Someone comes and offers me a six-figure job, six-figure job. What do you do? My number one priority is taking care of my family. Yeah. And he made the case. He says, hey, there comes a point where you do what you have to do. He said, but that doesn't mean you sell your soul.
Okay.
What other people think about you is what they think about you. And I mean, I just learned so many lessons from guys like that. Yeah. Just incredible. And then my dad always, as he got older, he had to retire early because he had some health issues. And so he had one of his legs amputated above the knee. And so I would help him do rehab and things. And we got an opportunity to kind of sit down and just talk. And so I really got to see him in a different light. It's not so much as a parent, but almost sort of as a friend, a mentor. Right. And, got an opportunity to talk to him about a variety of subjects and things.
It's interesting how as I get older and like our parents become our friends.
Yes.
That and my mom, before she passed, she was my friend.
Yes.
And that changed. Like I had to roll with that dynamic. Yeah. And the things she would tell me, I'm like, oh, she's talking to a friend. Right. Not her daughter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's priceless, Yeah. And it's funny, again, I talk about my sons all the time. Our conversations have changed. And then my wife and I talk about how, when you're a parent and you're going through raising your kids, that's one thing. And you can be friendly, but you really can't be friends. You can be friendly, you can be cordial, but you really can't be a friend. Now, they have a different appreciation, and our conversations change. And I tell Maggie all the time, my wife, I said, our role has really changed. I said, now we're grandparents, and yeah, we're going to do what we do with our grandkids, but we still have to support our sons in a different way. Yeah. And they come and ask different questions. Yeah. And sometimes it's so funny, it's almost like confession. They come in, Dad, when I was in high school, I did so-and-so. Yeah. And I just laugh, and I was like, well, let you know a little secret. We knew that. Yeah. It's funny. So he tells there's this one high school story with my youngest son. So he's in art class, and they asked for parents to go on. They're going on a field trip to Dallas. He's in art class, and a really good artist. And so he comes home and says, hey, they need some parents to volunteer to go on the bus to ride to Dallas to be chaperones. So my wife and I, okay, cool, no problem, yeah. So the morning of the trip, we get on the bus. We don't see our son. Bus takes off. We end up going to Dallas, spending all day with these kids and come back. So we get home, we pick him up and say, hey, wait, what happened? Oh, I never intended to go. They asked for parents.
Like, wow. So he just volunteered you.
Well, yeah. And we made the assumption, obviously, that he would be one of the kids on the trip. But that was, he got us on that one. We kind of laughed. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, there was no punishment on that one, but there was a lot of conversation. I was like, wow, you owe us one on that one, fella.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I distinctly recall, and I say this, how you always mimic your parents as you raise your kids. And I say to myself, I'm not your friend, I'm your mom, you know. And I remember my mom saying it to me, I'm not your friend. Right. This is not a friendship thing like that. I'm your parent, this was going to happen. But as she got older, then that changed. I had to, so... Yeah, that's funny. And we had some confessions, and she told me some stuff. That I'm like, you did what?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I wouldn't know I was your mama when she was saying.
Right. I have a past too.
I know. Well, speaking of past, so what would you tell your younger self?
It's interesting. To value education more.
Okay.
Yeah, to value education more. I think that would probably be the biggest advice I would give myself.
Okay.
And then do better with money, but value education more.
So what do you see MCC, like what are your goals as the board chair? So what do you see us taking MCC to the next level?
You know, that's really an interesting question because there are a ton of challenges.
Okay.
Funding's always a challenge. Student success is so difficult. So making sure that we continue to be cutting edge and innovative in terms of trying to educate our students, and things I worry about are like House Bill 8, how that's going to change, how the funding model changes, and then really making sure from a board's perspective that the staff and faculty have the resources necessary to do their jobs well. It's tough because there's so many forces, so many things that you can't control, and you end up having to make really, really tough decisions about what you can do and what you can't do. We can do just about anything, but you can't do everything.
Right.
And so anytime you prioritize things, it impacts somebody's life.
Right.
And not always in the most positive way. So I worry about those kind of things. As board chair, a couple of things that we always do. We want to make sure that the board stays in our lane and manages policy.
Okay.
And then also create an environment where we're working in tandem with the president and administration as opposed to trying to dictate what happens.
Right.
And thankfully, right now I feel like we have a tremendous partnership. We have a tremendous president that we hope to not take for granted.
Right.
We want her to stay as long as she wants to stay.
Right.
Realizing that nothing lasts forever. And so as far as the college itself, my hope is that we stay cutting edge and innovative.
Okay.
And that we stay ahead of the curve in terms of where society is going, where the next wave of jobs are going, so that we can prepare our students, to be productive and ready to take on the future.
Well said.
It's a lot, though.
It's a lot. Right. So anytime I see a faculty member with some cutting edge, innovative, I'm like, go for it.
Man.
Just go to the board chair meeting.
Man. And and here's the thing. I love administration because they are open-minded.
They are.
Last night, and I'll just tell you, we had a conversation about making sure that board members stayed in the policy-making realm.
Okay.
And the thing that happens is I told the board, I said, now, that doesn't mean that we can't make suggestions or ask questions.
Okay.
I said, but what has to happen is we need to realize it's not our job.
Right.
It's not our job to manage, do day-to-day
Got
things.
you.
It doesn't mean you can't make suggestions or be innovative or say, I'd love to see this or that. And so we have a really, really good board, really diverse board. One of the things that's interesting that people don't talk about, we're probably one of the very, very few boards in this area that has a majority of minority members. It doesn't come up much because we very, very seldom have issues that, as a matter of fact, I don't know that I've ever had any that are strictly based on race.
Right.
We just don't.
Right.
Now, with society the way it is now, issues may come up, but I really do think I always use sort of as our guiding philosophy, what's best for the students and what's best for student success. And in that there are a lot of things, but if we use that sort of as our matrix, then it sort of makes it easier to make all those other decisions. When you start talking about salaries or technology, expenditures, how does that impact the success of our students? And if you can stay focused on that, it really keeps a lot of the noise out.
Okay. Last one. What's your life's purpose?
Man, to serve.
Serve it.
Yeah, just service. It really is. I'm a religious person, but I don't beat people up with it. You know what I mean? I try to see the good in people and everything. But if you look at the Bible, you look at the life of Jesus, everything he did was based on service. Every job I've ever had has been based on service. My dad, my mom, my wife. It's service. And I really think people talk about ministries and this and that and Christians or whatever. When you're helping people, that's the gist of religion and of Christianity is helping people. And so I think I'm happiest when other people are successful. I love seeing other people be successful. That's why I love graduation. It's just like a fulfillment. It's like, wow, you really impacted society in a positive way.
Right.
So whatever little piece I can do, I just think our life's purpose is serving mankind.
Wow. Any other points you want to say to our listeners? I think that's it. Serving mankind. What else could you say after that?
Man.
So I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank you for coming on.
Man,
this has been an awesome conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I know people be enriched by this conversation. I want to thank my IT staff. Oh, they're awesome. Edgar and Connor. They keep me on my toes. They got me going. And my hidden contributor, Paula Unger, who makes sure that I'm staying on task. But thank you, everybody. I'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much.
All right.